Hi, my name is Romy. Welcome or welcome back to Start Pages. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Underwood Tapes by Amanda Dewitt. So I received an e-arc of this book from Peachtree Teen. Peachtree Teen is definitely getting up there in like my favorite publishing imprint or favorite publisher, because Andrew Joseph White's young adult books are published by Peachtree Teen, and then the first book I read by Amanda Dewitt, Red Martin Wins It All, which I loved, was also published by Peachtree Teen, so it's definitely on the list. So let me read the synopsis and then we can get into the review. 30 years ago, Grace's mom left her hometown of Hermitage, Florida and never looked back, which is exactly why Grace thinks it's the safest place to spend her summer now. Since her mom died in a car crash, Grace has been desperate to get away from the memories and reminders of her loss. Spending the summer transcribing cassette tapes for the Hermitage Historical Society might be boring, but boring is just what Grace needs. Until she hears the voice of Jake Underwood, the boy who first recorded the cassette tapes back in 1992. When Grace realizes he can hear anything she records, despite 30 years of time between them, they strike up an impossible conversation through the tapes. But the past isn't any simpler than the present, and a mystery has haunted Hermitage through the generations. In the 1970s, a hurricane made landfall and resulted in the tragic death of Jake's uncle Charlie. In a town as suffocatingly small as Hermitage, it's impossible not to notice how no one talks about the storm or Charlie, and as the mystery unfurls, Grace can't help but realize a worse truth. No one talks about Jake either. So, as I said, I read a book by Amanda Dewitt before, Rain Martin Writes It All, and I gave that one 4 stars. So I had really high hopes for this one, and thankfully it delivered. I gave the Underwood Tapes 5 stars, so I liked it more than Rain Martin Writes It All. So I'm definitely going to be going back and reading Amanda Dewitt's debut, Ace Wild, and then keep watching out for anything else she publishes in the future. In the Underwood Tapes, Amanda Dewitt ignores the forward movement of time in order to explore grief and friendship, and I loved it so much. Generally, I love when time is used as an additional plot device in stories, so I'm really glad it worked out in this book. This is mainly a character-driven story, and I'm very happy to see that the characters were written really well. Grace was an incredible character to follow, and I loved her narration and her internal monologue. Her emotions were depicted very vividly. There was nothing in the book that fell flat. I already said Grace was an incredible character to follow, but the rest of the cast of characters were also very fleshed out, and the setting, specifically scenery-wise, was also very immersive and well described. The book explores grief wonderfully, but my personal favorite aspect of the book was the friendships that we see develop. So there's Grace's friendship with Jake, and then Grace's friendship with Laura and Griffin. They are 2 different relationship dynamics, and you can see the difference. It's like a vast difference between them, and it makes sense because the relationships were developed under different circumstances, and they just have different. Grace has different feelings about them going into the relationship, so I liked how they were written. Not to pit the friendships against each other, but personally I had a soft spot for Grace and Jake's friendship. The way they grew to love each other was incredible, especially because it was like a non-romantic love that developed so deeply. I just loved it. The decision to sprinkle the tape recorder conversations throughout the whole book, and by that I mean there wasn't a rigid timeline in how the interactions happened. So it wouldn't be like, start of the chapter, Grace wakes up, she heads to the Hermitage Society, she transcribes the recording, and then she has a conversation with Grace, and then she moves on with her life, and rinse and repeat. It's sprinkled throughout the book. So like they have different conversations at different times throughout the book. The variation in the time between their conversations was great, as it went a long way in showing how the different aspects of their relationships, whether that be the conversation, working together to solve a mystery, or just knowing, or for Grace, like just knowing Jake was there for her and knowing that she was there for Jake, helped Grace handle her grief and made a positive impact on her as a character and her going through her life. And then I also think the development of a friendship between Grace, Laura, and Griffin was also really well done, and it definitely helped Grace along too. But that relationship, it just showed even more how much Jake's relationship helped Grace, because without that friendship she wouldn't have been open to be friends with Laura and Griffin. But having the 2 relationships definitely showed how they were both different and how they had different impacts on Grace. So as I said, it's mainly a character-driven novel, so the plot is mostly following the characters, but there is like an underlying plot to follow, like a plot outline to follow. So Grace and Jake are trying to solve the mystery of Jake's uncle's Charlie's disappearance, and then Grace is also trying to figure out why nobody talks about Jake in her present day. I think those 2 elements are linked very intrinsically, and I think it's done well overall. Like everything about the book, I love it. I gave it 5 stars. As I said, I loved everything about the book. I think of this book more of a character focused novel than a plot focused novel, because even though in the synopsis they mention Grace and Jake trying to figure out what happened to Jake's uncle, and then Grace trying to figure out what happened to Jake, the book is mostly focused on Grace dealing with her grief over her mother's death, and then her solving the mystery and developing the relationship. Just works to show her emotional development or how she's handling the grief or moving on. So that's why I say it's a character focused novel, but I do think the mystery, like solving the mysteries, the two mysteries, is a big part of the book, and it was done so well that I think even if I didn't love Grace as much as I did, or like the friendship between Grace and Jake, and then Grace, Laura, and Griffin, even if I didn't love that as much, just the clues or trying to solve the mystery would have been enough to keep me reading. It definitely wouldn't have been a 5 star if it was just to solve the mystery, but I would have finished the book and enjoyed it even if it was just the mystery, because it was done well, right? So that's really all I have to say, because it's a short, quick contemporary novel, because I read this book in 3 hours. If you go on my story graph, it says I took 2 days to read it, but that's because I started at 11 p.m. one day and then read it for 3 hours till 2 the next day. That just goes to show how good the book is, but also how short the book is. It's like 300 pages, I think. Anyway, I highly recommend this novel, and as I said, I will be keeping up with Amanda Dewitt in the future and going back and reading It Is Wild, the debut novel. Thank you so much once again to Peachtree Teen for an arc of this book. Regarding liking, commenting, and subscribing, do what you want. Bye.